All right. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you are joining us from some other place in Canada or elsewhere. I'm super excited today because I will be talking about a tool I really like that I've been using for years and that I think is a really, really useful tool and that I hope to convince you to adopt. So first of all, I will pass in the chat the link to the place in the website where you can find this webinar. And if you click on the slides link, that will open a Reveal.js presentation. And later today, or within a few days at the most, Alex will edit the video, put it on YouTube, and I will embed it below this link. So we will also find a recording on this page. And you can trust that the website is not going to break. So you don't have to take frantic notes. You can go back to it later on at your own pace. So I will talk about a tool called Lazygit, which is a user interface for Git. So if you are new to Git, you may find this talk maybe a little bit overwhelming, but that's okay. That can still work as an introduction to Git, but I'm not gonna teach you how to use Git. I will assume that you have some knowledge and understanding of Git, and I will do the classic operations and some fairly complex ones actually using this interface. So why am I so excited about this tool? Well, there are many ways to use Git, but there are three really main interfaces that are common out there. A lot of people use Git through some dedicated Git GUI, so GUI, graphical user interface. So some nice software that runs Git in the background and has some pop-up windows with some click things, and it's very visual, and you can see the diffs, and it's colored and meant to be really user-friendly. Some people use Git from the command line, so that's the pure basic Git without any layer added on top of it. And then in recent years, increasingly, a number of IDEs, for instance, think Jupyter Lab or RStudio or some text editor that are really full-featured and work as IDEs, such as VS Code, have some add-ons that integrate Git into that IDE. And those three methods are totally adequate, of course, but they do have some downside. I haven't tried any Git GUI in many, many years, to be fair. So they may have improved. Maybe I'm being very unfair here. But when I did play with them way back when, they were, all of them, absolutely disastrous. They were incredibly slow, super buggy, not necessarily user-friendly, and there were always some Git operations that you just could not perform through them. So I was left with a terrible, terrible perspective on these tools. But again, it's been years. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe they're great nowadays. I'm kind of skeptical, but could be wrong. Now, from the command line, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just austere. Git is a very powerful tool, and to be able to do super simple things like, okay, stage, commit, push, that's fine. But if you want to do some interactive staging of part of a file, if you want to do, and even to keep an eye on what's going on, like a Git status, Git log, the shape of your tree, how many commits you've made so far, you have to run a bazillion commands. You have to keep running Git status, Git log, Git this, Git that. So it's a bit unintuitive. It's fairly austere. Of course, you should be able to perform operations this way because sometimes you're working on a remote machine through SSH and that's all you have. But while it's good to know how to do it as an everyday way to run Git, it's not really efficient, I think. I think it's now those new Git integration within IDEs, they're pretty darn good, much better than the Git GUIs I played with years ago, but they tend to be fairly limited. And so they're great if you want to, commit, check out. But if you want to do some fancy rebase or create some new work trees, there's no way they're going to have that kind of capability. And also, they only work in that particular environment. For instance, if you use Git from RStudio, like that's fantastic to do version control on your R scripts maybe and your R Markdown documents, but you probably don't spend your entire life in RStudio. And if you want to use Git in some other context, well, then you're left kind of hanging. So a fourth approach, and that's the one that I really think is the right way to go about it, is to use TUIs. So TUIs are, some people call them text user interfaces or text-based user interfaces. They are also called terminal user interfaces. And I think that's the better word of them all, because it really shows that they're meant to run in the terminal, not just that they're based on text. And they're kind of like the precursor of GUIs. Before we had Windows and GUIs, well, some people who wanted to make the command line a little bit less austere came up with those TUIs. And well, the first TUIs were, clunky, like everything in the early days of the computing world. Nowadays, TUIs are beautiful. They absolutely haven't become out of fashion. And if you click on this link here, you could see there is an awesome TUI project that shows all of the modern TUIs and what they're for. And there's a ton of them, and they're sleek, and they're fast, and they're beautiful. There's one that I, use a lot. It's called Ranger. It's a way to, it's a file editor, really, a file manager. And I love it. And they combine the advantage of running in the command line, so you can launch them instantly. So they're all keyboard based, so you can, on a lot of them, do some operations with the mouse, but you don't have to rely on all this mouse nightmare. You can do most things with some key bindings. A lot of them have a Vim style key bindings. They're usually open source, customizable, like they're super fun. And also they're super fast, like they're really as fast as running things through the terminal, or just about, maybe sometimes a bit slower, but they're often written in Rust or Go, or sometimes Python, so some of them are a bit slower, but they're pretty fast, and they are as visual as graphical user interface. So you have the user-friendly visual aspect of a GUI while keeping the advantage of the terminal. So I love them. And when it comes to Git, there are actually quite a few of them. To go back to this awesome, oops, sorry, I closed it. This awesome TUI project, and you look for Git, you'll see there's quite a lot of them in there. Like there's Git UI that was written in Rust. There's a bunch of them. But the one that I think is probably the most polished at this point is Lazygit, and it has 52,000 stars, which is pretty big. It's quite out there. It's a very popular tool. It's heavily maintained by Jesse Duffield, and it's a project that I've been following almost from its very beginning. Like I bumped into it and started using it in its very early days, and I right away thought it was very great. But at the beginning, the interface was a little bit clunky. The key bindings were a bit unintuitive. There were a few things that weren't super smooth. And then, of course, the capabilities were a bit limited. But it's a good 5 years old now, fully matured, fairly well documented. If you want to install it, in the README, you will find the installation instructions for all OSs. And it's it's really perfect at this point. It's really good. And one thing that I wanted to show also is that the guy, Jesse, who develops this project, is super responsive to any suggestion. And so, for instance, just as a demo of its responsiveness, so in 2020, so in the early days of the project, I suggested a little improvement to display some diff, and I opened an issue about it with a feature request on February 23rd. And on February 23rd, I mean, it was an easy fix and an easy improvement, to be fair, but still, on that same day, boom, path suggestion implemented in a commit. So that's really a very cool project when you think it could be improved with something, you open an issue and path, instantly the guy is like, yeah, that's a good idea, and integrates it. He's also poked at his community for suggestions about the UI. So JC's work is fantastic, and it's a very good project. So let's start playing with it a little bit. So there is no man page for it, maybe a little bit surprisingly, but if you want to see the various options, you can just press Lazygit with the H flag. And there aren't a ton of options, because usually you're just going to launch Lazygit. But one flag that I find somewhat useful is the C or config flag that allows to print the default configuration. And I find it quite useful because, as any good open source tool, this is a tool that is entirely customizable. So you can copy this default configuration, create your own config file. It's in a YAML, I've never known how to pronounce this thing, but like YML format. So it's very intuitive on how to customize it, and you can change absolutely anything you want: the color, the size, the behavior, the key bindings. So like, I'm really big on having my own key bindings everywhere. That's entirely customizable. So really, really great. So let's get started with the demo. So here I have a few resources: the link to the GitHub repo, the default key bindings, a file that a README that explains in great details how you can configure the tool. But I wanted to keep this presentation incredibly short, because really the whole purpose for this webinar is a live demo, so that I can show you how cool this tool is. Two little notes before I get started. I am running another tool, so what you'll see is a teeny bit better than vanilla Lazygit, in that I am using this diff so fancy project as well. So my diffs look a teeny bit better. And so this is what diff so fancy does, and that's a tool that I also totally recommend. So on the left here, you can see a regular Git diff. So that's the default formatting. And on the right, the quality of the image on the repo is fairly low, so it's a bit blurred. I apologize for that. But I can post the link actually in the chat, so that maybe you'll be able to see it better on your own screen. This is what diff so fancy does. Git diff by default, and I think that's not a very good design decision of the people who built Git, outputs a lot of information that is very useful for the Git program internally, but that are just unusable for a user. Like all these things here, I mean, yes, you can learn exactly what they mean, but it's just extremely austere. So you have all this information about the various hashes of the diffs you are comparing, as if you remembered the hashes of both files, and like those very obscure things. So it's even hard to see how many files are involved in a diff. Well, with diff so fancy, the different files have this like big yellow header. So here, okay, in this diff, we have header clean.pl that's been modified. We have the package.json that's been modified. and we've deleted the file update deps.sh, something that's instantly visible, while here, like, you have to squint for a bit to even realize how many diffs are involved in this thing, how many files are involved in this diff. Another thing too is that it runs some flags automatically that allow you to see not just what line has been modified in the diff, because Git is a line-by-line software. So whenever you add, remove, or modify a line, which in the Git world means deleting one and adding a new one. So instead of just seeing that, you also have highlighted what part of the line has been modified. So it's a lot easier to instantly see, okay, it's not just that line that has been modified, but what in that line, okay, that particular part. So the diffs that will run in Lazygit will use this, so look a teeny bit nicer than they would by default if you just installed Lazygit, but it's super easy in the configuration file. Actually, I could show that to you. So the pager that I am using, I don't know if the font is big enough, but in the YAML configuration file of Lazygit, I can put pager diff so fancy instead of the default one, like if I had left this blank or not edited it. And that's it. And you can use Delta or some other pager if you wish. Super flexible. So let's, oh yeah, and the other little note that I wanted to mention is that I have this alias LG because I type Lazygit so often, I find it easier to type. So when you launch Lazygit, you would have to type the full Lazygit, but in my ZSHRC file, I have this LG alias, so I'll just type LG to launch the application. Okay, so let's create playing with it. So hopefully my terminal is big enough. If not, please unmute, mention it, or type in the chat. I will start by creating an empty directory that I will use for this demo. So I'm calling it lazygit_demo. Note that, oh, it already exists. So yeah, I practiced this morning, making sure I was on top of it. So let me clean it all, remove it, and that we can get started from scratch. Okay. Note that I am not putting any space, of course, in a directory. If you use Git, Git was built for Linux, and Linux doesn't like spaces. So if you use Git, even if you are on Windows, please never any space. Use underscore, capitalize later, so camel case, neck case, but no spaces. Okay, so now I will enter, of course, this directory, and you can see there's nothing in it, totally empty directory. So to save the trouble of creating a bazillion files one by one, I will now copy instantly a bunch of files that I have stored somewhere that are a couple of files from the website that I am using to create material, just to populate our empty directory with some stuff. So here I'm just copying a number of files from some other directory that I prepared. I'm copying them in here. So now what do I have? So we have a README, which is a markdown file, and 3 subdirectory: imaging with some images, outputs, and src with some source code. You can see that there is no hidden file. This is the whole, that's all there is. And there is a Linux command called tree that allows to see the structure easily of what is in a directory with the content of the subdirectories. So that's convenient, so that because that gives us a good idea of what's in our new project. So in the IMG subdirectory, I have 3 PNG files. In the outputs, I have a bunch of HTML files, because as I said, that's just a few excerpts of my website. And in the source code, I have some QMD files, which are Quarto markdown files. So they're text files that are the source files that then get rendered into HTML for the production of the file. So, okay. So at this point, this is a directory. So running Lazygit init would be useless because Lazygit works in a Git repository. So first, I need to run git init so that now I have a Git repo. So if I run ls-a, now you can see that I have this .git subdirectory, which is a hidden subdirectory. So now I am in a Git repo. So now I can launch Lazygit. So my little alias LG. So this is the interface, and I will be right back. Excuse me for one instant. Yeah, sorry about that. I turned up the heat. It's very cold in my office, and I'm starting to freeze. So let's explore the interface together a little bit. So on the left side, you have a number of panes, and it's a bit hard to see because they're grayed out when they're not active. And again, you can customize the colors, whether things are in bold or which color, like everything's customizable. You can remove the little icons if you don't like them. You can do anything you want in that easy custom file. But if you squint, you might be able to see that they have some little numbers. So 1 is status, 2 files, worktree submodules, 3 local branches, remote, and tags, 4 commits replug, 5 stash. And then the stuff on the left will change depending on where I am in those boxes. And at the bottom right, there's the command log. Whenever you perform an action in this user interface, the git command that actually gets run by Lazygit will pop up here, which is very useful. So to navigate this interface, there are a ton of key bindings that, again, can be fully customized. So I have my own, so I won't tell you what the defaults are because I don't remember, but there are keys to go from one box to another. You can also call them by their numbers. So for instance, 4 gets me here, 1 gets me over here. And when you are within one of the little pane, you can, of course, navigate up and down, at the top, at the bottom, etc. So here, what do we have? The files, well, those are the file that we have in here, right? Nothing surprising. And they come with a question mark because they're unknown to Git. They're unstaged. They're out of the index. So that's the classic Git symbol for unknown files, unstaged files. Note that I can also change the view, like the way the tree is displayed, and that can be useful because in this format I can easily close various sections, and that can be convenient. And I can also apply a command to an entire subdirectory. But if you want to see how many files you have in total, for instance, well, now we know that we have 15 files because we have 15 lines in here, something that is hidden if you had some lines due to those subdirectory lines, or that can be just more convenient for some other reason. Now, as I move from one file to another, you can see that what happens on the right here in this situation are my unstaged changes. So when I am going over images, Well, those are binary files. I don't have anything because Git doesn't do non-text files. You can stage and commit binary files, but you cannot see any diff. You cannot, a lot of the Git functionality doesn't work on that. But as soon as I get into a text file, such as, for instance, an HTML file, here I can see right away the unstaged changes into that file. And it's actually quite interesting because a Git usually doesn't easily tell you what's in subdirectories until you stage the files. Like if you run git status, when you have a bunch of files, of new files in a directory, it's just going to tell you that the subdirectory is new. It's not going to list you the files, but Lazygit actually does it, which is convenient. Okay. Then what else do we have? So here, Lazygit is kind of not cheating, but going ahead a teeny bit, because it says that our local branch is main, but we haven't created a branch yet. And that's why we have this little log that says, okay, well, like ref heads main doesn't exist. So that's just the GUI that's kind of like showing you the branch that's about to be created in advance before it exists. And then we don't have any commits, we don't have any stash. So how do we commit files? Well, let's, for instance, start with the README. I can just press the space bar, and that's the default key binding, and it turns the README into the classic Git green color. It's very unfortunate for colorblind people, but that's a decision of the Git developer at the time. The question marks are turned into A to show that it's a file that was added. So it's a new addition into the index. And now on the right, I have staged changes instead of unstaged changes. So that's the diff so fancy format. So by default, you would have the classic diff, which is, again, as I said, a little bit different, but this shows us what has been staged. Now, how do I make a commit? Well, I press C, and I have a little pop-up that asks me for my commit message. So I'm not going to be very creative. I'll just type initial commit. And then it's a good practice when you create a Git commit to have a short summary at the top that shouldn't be more than, I don't know, 50 characters, like not much at all. Then to have a blank line below and then have descriptions. And this is what this interface follows. So I could type a line as long as I want, but it's best to just go into the description if you want to add more info. And notice how you have some little helps along the way. Like for instance, press tab to toggle focus. So I am reminded how to move from one to the other. And here I could type add ready. Okay. And if I press enter, I have created a first commit. So what has happened? The README file has disappeared from my working space because there is no new change. It's clean as far as Git is concerned. If I were running Git status, because this is kind of the equivalent of Git status, what you see here, like over here. If you run Git status now, the README is out of the way. Now, if I go back to my local branch main, I don't have this fatal error anymore because now I do have a commit. So here I have the equivalent of git log. So that's the log at this point. So I have the short version of the commit hash. I can see that head is pointing to main. Can see the author, the commit message that is properly formatted following the ideal recommendation of Git with the little space in between. And also in the command log, I can see each time I have run something, in the command log, the command run popped up. So at first I added the README file, like I staged it. So that's the equivalent of git add README or git add -README, which is a more secure way to show that what follows is not a flag, but it's a file. We often omit those -- but it is like a safer way to run it. Then I created a commit, so that's the equivalent of git commit -m initial commit, and then -m add readme. Or I could have also written it with some line breaks, but this is equivalent. And then I have the git output of my first commit. Now, if I go to my commits, you can see that I have my first commit. So this is an equivalent of running git log one line graph with some formatting. So it's a compact version of the log. And I can see here what exactly happened in this commit. So there is the diff and also summary of the diff, which is actually this little addition at the top is what I suggested years ago in that issue that was instantly embraced by the developer. So now I can see a good summary of that commit. Okay, so let's create more commits. Images, sometimes you want to put them under version control if, for instance, you build a website and they are needed for the website, or if you want to share them with a collaborator and you're collaborating through Git and, for instance, GitHub. But usually, other than those particular contexts, binary are not something you would want to put under version control. So I'm going to put those into gitignore. I could put them one by one. So if I press I, it opens a gitignore pop-up. And so the default is to add to gitignore, but you could also add them to git info exclude. But instead of doing them one by one, I can just, oops, sorry. That's the advantage of this format instead of this one. I can just press I on the img, sorry, like I'm selecting not just one file, but the subdirectory itself. And it doesn't matter whether it's open or closed. And if I press I here, that's going to add to the gitignore, not the individual file, but the whole subdirectory. So I will do that. So consequently, my git status up here shows me that this whole subdirectory and its content have disappeared. But at the bottom here, I have this new file, .gitignore, of course, that is unstaged, untracked, and that contains img. So I'm going to stage it and create a new commit. So add gitignore with mg subd, for instance. Okay. So now you can see that if I go to my main branch, the full log shows that I have my two commits. And at the bottom, I have this compact log of my commit history, and I can see information about every single commit. I can also click on a particular commit to see exactly the diff of the file. So here, because my commits are so minimal, I haven't created a commit that involves a lot of files. This is quite useless, but I will show you when that comes in handy. Then here, there is also this reflog tab. So reflogs are a way for Git to track the movement of head so that head can be moved back to its previous position or to previous two positions ago. So if you want to see the reflog, there is this tab down here. Okay. Okay, let's see on my little list, because I tried to think of all the things I should show you. So I want to try to do things in order. Okay, so outputs are also something that you normally don't want to put under version control, because outputs can be recreated from the source code. So it's kind of silly to clutter your version control history with all the outputs. So graphs, output files, results, all of that. I mean, you can just rerun the source code file to recreate them. So what's the point? So I'm going to put all of that in my git ignore as well. So now I'm going to create a new commit with this git ignore, but maybe I'm a bit bummed that I first added just the image subdirectory and then the output subdirectory. So, okay, so add another subdir to git ignore. But like maybe I'm like, bummer, shoot. I'm creating an unnecessarily long history here. How about I want to rewrite history? I want to squash that commit into the other one. So squashing means I want to combine the changes of both commits together. Or I could do a fix-up. A fix-up is a squash that keeps the message of the initial commit. So let's do a fix-up. So to do that, I want to do a fix-up by moving my last commit onto the one below. Oh, by the way, if I know my key bindings, but if you don't, you can press X at any point and it shows you all of the key bindings, which are super convenient. So local, that means the key bindings that you can run in that particular pane, and then global are key bindings that work from anywhere, or the navigation key bindings also run from anywhere. And those are my key bindings. So that's cool that when it uses to create this little pop-up, your own config file. So if you create some key bindings and then you don't remember when they are, it's not going to show you the default key bindings. Whenever a command is barred, that means that at this point, with the current situation, that is a command that cannot be run. It doesn't make sense to run it. Those are it's not a bug. It's just it's on purpose. It shows that you can, like for instance, I cannot move that commit up because it's the upmost commit. So I know that to do a fix-up for me, it's F, but if I didn't know, okay, I could press X, and then I know this is a local key binding that I'm looking for, because this is a fix-up is something that you do on commits. So I look in that local section and I can go, fix-up F. Okay, so then I can press F. And then, are you sure you want to fix up the selected commits into the commit below? Whenever some operations are involve rewriting history, which is something that cannot be undone, there are some safety guards. You are asked for confirmation, which is very good, because there are operations in Git that are totally non-dangerous. But when you start to play with the Git history, when you start to rewrite commits, that can be more consequential. So it's nice to have some little safety, so that if you press F by accident, if you have like an unfortunate key press, well, you don't end up like rewriting your history and be like, oh darn it. So do I want? Yes. So I press enter and poof, okay. You can see that now I have only 2 commits because the last 2 got squashed together. If I had squashed, runs S for squash instead of F for fix-up, I would have had a little pop-up asking me to rewrite the commit message. Because I did a fix-up, it reused the commit message of the commit below. Now, you can see that in this commit, I have in the diff of this commit 2 lines added to the git ignore now. EMJ and outputs. But that means that actually my commit message is not good anymore. But no problem, I can rewrite it. So I'm gonna add git ignore with EMG and outputs subdeals. And the classic Emacs key bindings were here, which was actually one of my suggestions as well. So the classic command line shell key bindings like Control A, Control E work here, which is convenient. So I have done this. Okay. Now let's go back to my files. I don't have a lot of files here, but if I had a lot of them, I can easily search them. So note that at the bottom here, a little search pop-up opened. So I can search, for instance, all of my slides Quarto files. And oh, here they are. Okay, so with N and P, I can go from one to the other. So maybe I want to stage only part of those files. So instead of doing space to stage, I can also press enter. And here what happens is that I have two panes. On the left, the unstaged changes, and on the right, the stage changes. And here I can do a line by line staging. Each time I press space, you can see that the change go from the unstaged to the stage change box. I can, of course, revert it. And I don't have to do a line by line thing. I can also select, oh, sorry, my Lazygit froze. It happened yesterday again. It's never happened to me before, but yesterday I had the first instance of this happening. So no big deal. Let me just relaunch it. But yeah, it normally doesn't happen. I don't know what has been happening. But so let's go back to, so I was doing a search. So I was searching for slides. So I had both my slides. So for the first one, I was showing you how to stage and unstage, but you can also select an entire chunk and then stage this. So for instance, I have staged the front matter of that file. And then I can go back to my other file. So here I have AM. So because it was an unknown file, I'm staging a subsection of it. So it's added, so it's A. And now that it's that file has entered the index, the rest has been modified and unstaged. So I have A for the added section in green because it's staged. And now that the file is in the index, everything else is M for modified, but red because it's unstaged. Those are Git classic. That's Git. That's not Lazygit. That's just Git. I can do the same for this file as well. I'm gonna stage not just the entire file, but just the front matter. Okay. So and here I'm gonna say so add front matters, slides, files. Okay. So now you can see that for those two files, they're in the index, so they're modified and unstaged. To cancel the searching thing, I can just press the escape key binding, which for me is Control G. Okay. So now if we go to the commits, we have 3 commits, of course, and I can either with the mouse or with some key scroll the content of the diff of that particular commit. Okay, so if you want to see the entire log, you can also go to the status box and press A. And here it looks exactly the same as the log of the branch, because we have a single branch. But when you start to stash changes or create a bunch of branches, this is going to be the equivalent of git log all. That shows you all of the branches and the stash, which git log by default doesn't do. So let's create some new branches and some stashes to show all that. So let me commit everything. So if I want to stage everything, there is an easy command. I can just press A and everything gets staged. So I can just add drafts, slides, and top files. Okay. So now let's create a bunch of new files. Oh no, let's create some modifications actually, so that I'll show you how to stash things. So let's exit Lazygit, and I'm gonna quickly make changes to a bunch of files, to 3 of the files. So actually, let me pass this. So I'm gonna add a new line that just says new line to 3 of the files, 3 of the QMB files in SRC. Just quickly, so that we can have those changes here. So notice how if I select the subdir, the diff shows the subdir of the entire subdirectory. So for all the files, but I can also see them for every single file. Okay, so I have those changes here. What if I want to put them out of the way in a stash to do other things? Because there are some Git operations that you can only do if you have a clean working tree. So maybe those aren't ready to be committed, but I want to have a clean work tree. So, okay, let's do it. So I'm just going to open the stash options, or I could just create stash the changes directly and then give the name of a stash, but I can also see the various stash options and all the changes, stash and keep in index, including untracked files, etc. Here I want to stash all the changes, which is the equivalent of just running the regular stash key. So you need to give your stash a name, of course. So let's call it, that's going to be draft files, new line. Okay. So now, of course, my working tree is clean, so git status wouldn't return anything. But at the bottom here, I have my stash. So it is on branch main. It's called drafts line new line. And you can see the diff of that stash. And then if I want to see what to do with it, I can apply it, pop it, drop it, do all the regular things that I can do in a stash. So apply will apply them, but keep them in the stash. Drop, remove them from the stash, whether or not they've been applied. And pop applies them and deletes the stash. Applying is kind of nice if you want to apply the same things to a bunch of branches, for instance. But here, let's say that I want to pop them back. So I run pop. Are you sure you want to pop this stash entry? Yes. So I've popped them, so the changes are back in my working tree, and my stash now is empty. Now, let's imagine that I want to get rid of all those changes. I can press Ctrl-D and it's going to discard the changes of a particular file. So be careful that this is not something that you can revert. Like that's not something, it really gets rid of changes. So it's one of those things in Git that you can't go back to. And what is nice is that for some operations, the ones beside the very easy basic ones, you have a little pop-up at the bottom that gives you some info. So as you hover over various commands, it tells you what's gonna what that is gonna do. And again, things that are bad are things that can't be done. So I could do that for all of the files, but I can also really just that the entire work tree. If I have a bunch of changes, I've been doing a bunch of mess, I know it's all garbage, I don't want to keep any of it, I want to really get rid of everything that's not in the index, there is a command for that. Of course, I don't use it often, so I don't remember what it is, but you can explode the work tree somehow. I have it in my notes somewhere. It's called nuke the work tree or something. Okay, let me look it in my little notes, because I mean, you don't nuke all your changes often. I think it might be capital D. Yes, capital D opens a pop-up, and then that allows you, okay, so capital D opens a pop-up for all the really big changes. If you want to do a git reset, if you want to do a git clean, so remove some file from the index, or if you want to just do a git reset, how to add, and then clean all of the files, which is what they're called, nuke the working tree, and it explains to you what it does. You can just run this and boom, okay, it's cleaned everything. So obviously this is don't lose your data, don't this is Git, don't Git can be very powerful, so be careful what you do. Now, what about I want to revert some commit? So for instance, I created this commit here, and I think that was a mistake. Well, I can revert that commit. So because this is, again, something fairly, this is something that I could revert back, but I still have a little confirmation message. Yes, I want to. Okay. Okay, so I have some conflict. I am not sure. Oh, because I know. Yeah. Totally my fault. It's because I exploded all my files, so of course I can't revert the change because I destroyed my file. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. So let's recreate some files so that I can show this to you. Yeah, I shouldn't have nuked my whole working tree, because now I can't show you what I wanted to. I can, of course, close Lazygit to go back to the shell, or I can also actually run shell commands inside Lazygit. It doesn't add a lot of capability because it's gonna put Lazygit temporarily in the background to show me my shell. So it's as easy to just close it and reopen it. But let's create a bunch of files. So here I have some suggestions from my history, actually. So let's go with that. As you can see, it's put Lazygit in the background anyway. So I could have just as well closed Lazygit and gone to the command line. But you can still run shell commands from it, even though, again, that doesn't add much benefit. Okay, so I have a bunch of new files. So let's, for instance, I can also actually here use the V thing as well to select multiple at once. And so add files 1, 2, 6. Okay. So now, if I go back to my commit, and if I want to revert it, I can revert it, and it does a new commit that does the opposite of the previous commit. So I had created this new commit with those files. I revert it, so I delete those commits. I can also do a reset. And this is very nice because I never remember whether what the difference is between a mixed and a soft reset, but here you have explanations of what those are. So if you want to reset everything from a particular commit, say this commit, you can do a reset and boom, it resets the state of your working directory to that particular point. Of course, be careful with the resets, particularly the hard reset, because you can lose your data. Now, I can, of course, create new branches. So let's call it test. And then I can check out branch simply by pressing the space key. I can, of course, also rename branches. Let's call it dev. Test wasn't so great. Okay. So I can switch branch super easily. So now let's switch to dev and let's try to create some conflict. So I will go to file 7, and so I will echo version 1 to file 7. Okay, so now file 7 as version 1. So I'm going to create a commit with that. So let's call it version 1 to file 7. Okay, so now I go to main, I check out main, then I go back to my file, and I'm going to edit file 7, but with a different version. So I'm going to add the line version 2 to file 7. Now, so if I go to file 7, it's version 2. So I create a commit, add version 2 to file 7. Okay, so now look, when I am like main is checked out. So if you look at my commit history, I have add version 2 to file 7. I go to dev and I checked it out. Poof, I have version 1 to file 7. And the reason the commit has a different color is because that commit was not done on the main branch. Your commits on the main branch are green. On a different branch, they are orange, so that you can visually spot easily that, oh yeah, that commit is on another branch. So here I have the log of dev. Here I have the log of main, but if I want to see log all, again, I can go over here, and this shows me the whole log. I forgot to show it to you when I had stashes, but the way to see your stashes is also to run git log all, so you would see it here. So you can see that my two branches have diverged because I have created commits on both branches, and I created a conflict. So I can merge main into dev, and boom, I have a conflict, which was the whole purpose. So I can open my text editor and change it manually, but I can also just view the conflict. And here I have the conflict. If there were many, they would all show there. And what is really cool is that I can directly in Lazygit choose which version of the conflict I want to pick. If you want to pick yet something else, of course, you can open your text editor and combine version 1 and 2. But if this is just a question of choosing one or the other, can be like, okay, yeah, I like this one. Book, okay, I've resolved the conflict resolved, continue, yes, and up, I have done a merge of my main branch into dev. And so if I look at the map, I have created this merge commit, and I have merged the branch. It is 11, so we're out of time, but there are other things I'd like to show you, so I'll just run a bit further, but feel free to leave if you have to. It's going to be recorded, and Alex will post the video, and you can watch it later. I apologize for running out of time. Let's create a remote, because so far everything is local, right? We haven't created any remote. So let me go to I'll create a remote on GitHub. So I'm going to my GitHub repository, of course. I'm creating a new repo, and let's call it Lazygit demo. Okay, so that's going to be my remote. It's going to be hosted on GitHub. So now I can copy the SSH path for this remote. Okay. So now I go back to Lazygit and I create new for a new remote. I will call it, well, let's call it the same thing I've been calling it online. No, or Lazygit demo. Yeah, which is what I've been creating online anyway, I think. But it doesn't matter. That's going to be the remote name on my local repo. The URL, I put the SSH, or if you don't have SSH, you can put the HTTPS, but then you'll have to type in your password. Okay. And automatically, poof, Lazygit is fetching from that remote. So right now, there's nothing to fetch because it's an empty remote with nothing in it. But if it had some content, it automatically fetched. So now that it's been fetching it, I can do a push. So of course, the first time you push to a remote with Git, you have to run this like dash capital U to associate a remote branch to a local branch. And so here I can choose the name of the remote and the branch name. Okay, I'm on dev. Maybe I want actually to associate the main remote. So, how can I modify this? Edit. Okay. So the name, yes, and this is still correct. Okay. And if I want to push, okay, yeah. So I want to associate Lazygit demo with main. So if I press enter, poof, it's pushing. And now if I go to my remote and I press refresh, you can see that it's pushed my stuff. And I have only associated main, so I only have main. I could do the same, of course, for dev. And you can add any number of remotes. You can also add tags. So you can add tags to branches, or you can add tags to a particular commit. For instance, if at this point, or this was a critical commit, I should have added a tag here. Well, I can add a tag, and this is going to be my version 1.0, because that was the commit that finalized version 1. So now you can see that I have this tag that was added here. So now, of course, I can pull and I can push because I have this associated remote. And if I go to tags, I can see my tag. And if I press enter, that will check out the tag automatically. If now I do, say, a squash here, so I'm on this last commit here, and I'm going to do a squash. Do I want to do a squash? Yes. So now that I've squashed those files, look what's going on up here. Here I have rewritten my history. And that's something that you really don't want to do when you're collaborating with someone through some remote, because it's going to mess up their own history. So you can modify your history all you want before you have pushed. But if you're collaborating, it's really a bad idea to rewrite history after you have pushed. Of course, if you're working by yourself and the remote is only there as some form of backup, then it doesn't matter. So what's going on here? Well, my local repo is one commit behind. That's the little up arrow here, because this commit with this particular hash doesn't exist in the history. I just created, it's a commit that results in the squash of the previous two commits. but also 2 commits behind. Did I say behind earlier? I meant ahead. It's ahead by 1, because this one doesn't exist in the remote. But it's also behind by 2, because the 2 commits that were squashed, they're now still on the remote, but they're not on my local repo. So basically, the remote and the local repos have diverged because I've rewritten history. But that's okay. I can still push and just do a force push to rewrite the history on the remote. And that's really what you don't want to do when you're collaborating. The branches have diverged, I've diverged, I've rewritten the history locally. So I'm now 1 commit ahead, the squash commit, 2 commits behind, the 2 previous commits I've destroyed in the squash. But I'm gonna force push, boom, and I've changed the history also on the remote. You can also, and again, that's a form of rewriting history, so don't do it after you've pushed if you collaborate, change the order of commits. You can move commits up and down, and as I do this, you can see what happens at the top here. Because each time I do something like this, it may look like on the interface I'm just moving lines up and down, but if you look at the commit IDs carefully, they are changing because each time I rewrite the history, the old commits with their refs get destroyed, new commits with new refs get created. Of course, all of the changes in the files are managed by Git perfectly so that I don't lose the changes. I'm just playing with my commit history here, not my actual changes inside the files, but I'll have to do a force push then to rewrite the history on my remote as well. You can also do some rebase similarly, or if you want to look at the various rebase options, you can select M and then continue. Oh, no, it's not. What is the, well, I guess I can just press X. Okay, well, let's keep it simple. Let's not do this. Oh, something else. Have you ever wished that you wanted to have multiple branches checked out at the same time? Like sometimes you have, for instance, your main branch and then your development branch. And so the state of your files, of course, are different on one branch and the other. And you can switch branches so that you can expand the files that are in their compact version inside the .git directory into your working directory so that you can see them, edit them, and all that. But maybe you don't want to have to switch branches back and forth all the time. Maybe you just want to have a new directory that has the content of a branch checked out. You can do that in Git thanks to work trees. And it's super easy to work with work trees with Lazygit. So here I have a single work tree, of course, that's the default one, but I can create a new one. Oh, is it frozen again? Yeah, it's frozen again. Yeah, it normally doesn't do that. Don't think that Lazygit is unstable. It never done that before yesterday. So I can create a new work tree, either from ref, meaning from the commit where I am, or from some detached ref. And then you choose which ref you want to use to create your new work tree. So you could select a particular commit, or you can select anything you want, but you can also select a branch. Here, let's select a branch. I want in this new work tree to have my branch dev, so that I'll have a subdirectory with my branch dev checked out. But I could check out any other commit here. So dev. Now you have to type the path of that subdirectory where you want that branch checked out. So let's call it hotfix. Okay. And the new branch name. So I'm going to leave this blank because I'm checking out the branch dev. So let's call it, let's leave it at that. So now I have two work trees. And if I go back to my files, and if I look at the tree, look at what has happened. I have now this new hotfix subdirectory here. And in this hotfix subdirectory, I have my entire dev branch checked out. So that means that I have in this subdirectory all of the projects in the state at which it is in the dev branch. While, of course, outside of hotfix, this is the main branch. So those work trees are a way to check out multiple branches at the same time. And that's a Git feature, of course, but it's just super convenient through Lazygit. And now I can switch work tree super easily and look what happens. Here I am on the hotfix work tree. So the branch that is checked out, of course, is dev. And you can see the path, and you can see the commits on the branch dev. But if I check out the Lazygit demo work tree, like the main work tree, now up, it's the main branch that is checked out, and I can see the state of main. And you can see here the whole log with our remotes, our tag, and everything. And yeah, maybe I should leave it at that, because I think we have covered most things, except for the rebase. I somehow I don't remember how to yeah, there's something I wanted to demo and I can't remember how to do it. But otherwise, yeah, we've covered most things. And of course, you cannot delete your main work tree, because that's like the main work tree of the project. So if I try to delete this, how do I even delete one? Oh, it tells me you cannot remove the main work tree, but I can delete my hotfix work tree when I'm done with it. And the dev branch that was linked onto main at that particular path gets unlinked. And if I go back to my file, the whole hotfix subdir with that checked out branch has disappeared. So yeah, sorry for running out of time and for not making the perfectly smooth presentation I was hoping to do. But the bottom line is that Lazygit is a great tool, and I encourage you to check it out, because it makes running Git from the command line very visual, very easy. Yeah, it's just grand. If you have any question about it, oh yeah, I should actually show you this. You have links here to the default key bindings that you can also output with Lazygit -c. The markdown files with all the config options, some YouTube tutorial, and then if there's an issue that's like some problem or feature request you want to suggest through a GitHub issue, you can do that here. And if you have some questions, down here in the Ask Question, that link will take you into the discussions section of the project, where you can ask questions on how to do something when it's not it doesn't deserve opening an issue. And I hope you do give Lazygit a try, but I just use it all of the time.